On behalf of the World Forum for Ethics in Business, we extend a warm welcome to the biggest global summit of the year, Changing Paradigms in a Pandemic World. How do we regain trust? The World Forum for Ethics in Business is a public interest foundation registered in Belgium. The mandate of the forum includes all manner of pursuing and establishing the indispensable ethical foundations of business in a globalized world. Today, on the occasion of World Health Day, WFEB has invited leading experts like yourselves to put into perspective the current ethical and other implications and consequences of the pandemic on our health, our work, and our life. We at the Art of Living Corporate Programs are delighted to partner with WFEB. We look forward to hearing from you in this session titled Crisis, Opportunity, Keeping Up the Happiness Quotient in Corporate India. During the course of the session, feel free to tweet, like, and ask your questions on your YouTube chat channel. It's my pleasure and privilege to introduce to you your session moderator, Mr. Adesh Goyal. Adesh holds key leadership responsibilities at Tata Communications. These include being the Executive Vice President and Global Chief Human Resources Officer, the Chief Ethics Officer, Chairman of Tata Communications Payment Solutions, Director of Tata Communications Transformation Services. But what does not appear on your slide, and in addition, Adesh was recently featured for his prolific work in HR and was acknowledged and featured by Forbes India as having done prolific work in increasing employee engagement and well-being during the pandemic. We also would like to share that Adesh has been on the board of several HR industry bodies, including SAP SuccessFactors, CHRO, Global Advisory Board. We're really delighted to have your expertise in moderating today, Adesh. A very warm welcome to you. Over to you, Adesh. Thank you.
Neti, thank you so much. And hello, everyone. We know that people from all over the world, different time zones are joining. So namaste, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. The pandemic has been a massive experiment. It's been a global experiment. Obviously, none of us planned for it or asked for it. It was entirely unwanted. And it was suddenly thrust upon us, 7 billion people in 200 plus countries, and it affected everyone. To say that it has been brutal would be a gross understatement. There has been unimaginable suffering. The setbacks would take years to recover. However, as is the case in every crisis, there have been shining lights the world over. There's so many examples of NGOs and people coming together to serve other people. Organizations like the Art of Living Foundation has served millions of meals to the needy. The Bollywood actor Sonu Sood sent thousands of migrant workers back home to their villages from the big metros where they had come to work. Thousands of people and organizations brought smiles onto others, not just to the beneficiaries, but also those who heard these wonderful stories. Companies scampered very, very quickly to get their employees to work from home. The safety and health of employees became their first priority, and soon it morphed into well-being in many companies. A few companies started to talk about happiness. This has developed very, very rapidly and continues to develop. Happiness actually has become a huge priority during the pandemic. The course called The Science of Wellbeing, offered by the Yale University on Coursera, has been already completed by 3.4 million people, and the rating a whopping 4.9 on a scale of 5. A second course called A Life of Happiness and Fulfillment, offered by the Indian School of Business, again on Coursera, has just been completed by 400,000 people with a rating of 4.8, again on a scale of 5. There seems to be a lot of demand for this, and as a happiness teacher, a volunteer of Art of Living, we have lots and lots of other examples of how people, organizations, companies are dealing with happiness. The topic today is quite an amazing topic. The theme is crisis. Or is it an opportunity? And how to keep the happiness quotient going up in India. We have a most amazing elite panel today. These are the leaders who have been very, very successful in their careers and are experts in multiple fields. They're running large organizations and have responsibility for tens of thousands of people. And they have done some unique work during the pandemic. It will be very, very interesting and impactful discussion in the next 90 minutes. Let me now introduce you the panel that we have today. Let me begin with Arjun Singh. He is the Managing Director, Asian Country Head for Investnet Yodlee. And he has previously held many, many senior roles at Aon Hewitt, WNS, ABN AMRO Bank, in Amsterdam, G Capital, and many others. He's also a trustee of Home Foundation School for underprivileged children and on the advisory board of SHRM India. Our next panelist is Bhumika Srivastava. She's the head of employee experience at Airbnb India, and she has led human resource functions in Snapdeal, Tesco, Yahoo, Adobe, and Newgen. And her area of expertise are org design, org development, diversity, change management, etc. I'd like to come to Soumitra Bhattacharya next. He's the Managing Director and Regional President for Bosch Group in India. And he's the Chairman of Robert Bosch Engineering and Business Solutions. He's also the Chairman of Bosch Chassis Systems in India. And he's the Chair of CII, the National Committee on MNCs. And lastly, he's a member of the Special Investment Promotion Task Force constituted by the government of Karnataka. Last but not the least, Supriya Dhanda, who is the Vice President and Country Manager of Western Digital India and serves on the board of Western Digital India. She was awarded as the CEO of the Year for Diversity and Inclusion at the Global DEI Summit in 2020. She has served in companies like General Electric, Alcatel-Lucent, and SanDisk. She is a board member at several companies and in an advisory as well as an independent capacity. So as you can see from the brief summary of our eminent speakers, we are going to have a lot of impactful discussion today. In terms of the flow and format, each speaker will speak for 8 minutes. And then I'll ask each one of them a question. After this, we will take up the questions from all of you, the audience. Please watch out for the instructions on how to send your questions to the organizing team. And we are keenly looking forward to getting lots of questions because your questions will give a bigger life, a more meaningful life to this discussion and really challenge all of us as speakers. With this, the preamble is done, and I'd like to invite the first speaker, Soumitra Bhattacharya, and let's welcome him with an applause. Soumitra?
Thank you, Adesh. Am I visible? Am I audible? Because this is
Yes.
what we do in COVID times.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So I think it's wonderful to be talking to you, unfortunately virtually, but I think we've got used to it. Can we have the first slide, please? I'd like to share with you a story, not just about myself, but more importantly about our organization and what we went through during COVID times. And the topic is very apt. The first thing I'd like to tell you about is, can we go to, yes, please. The first thing I'd like to tell you about our company, our parent is in 150 countries. We are 136 years young. The company is approximately 6,20,000 crores with around 4 lakh employees, of which 73,000 work in R&D. And most importantly, the company is constantly looking at the future. For example, 8 to 10% of the turnover for decades has been spent on R&D. Incidentally, India has the largest R&D center in the world after Germany. And the very interesting and unique part of this company is it's private limited, it's debt-free, and very importantly, 92% of the company is owned by a trust. The founder gave 92% of his wealth to a trust, which is the Robert Bosch Trust. So the whole company is based on ethics. India is not as young as our parent. We are 99 years young. And the company is a very quiet, unglamorous company with ethics and values. So what happens to such a company and its people, including me, in a year where the only certainty was uncertainty? Next slide, please. What we saw in this uncertainty was where, the previous year we had, 5 signatures for working from home for 2 days a month. We suddenly went into working from home all the days in the month, and it was digital. There was a lot of apprehension, fear. The one thing that we started doing was communicate, communicate, and communicate. And the most important part in this communication was spend 80% time in listening. Not that we had ideas or clear solutions. Honestly, at the start, I had no clue. I was just like anybody else, and along with my colleagues, grappling at everything that we could grab. And it was like anybody else on the street or in the house or not in the office. But what we continued doing was communicate. I myself held about 70 sessions for colleagues anywhere between 50 to 250, 300. But important part was honesty, important was transparency and authenticity. Next slide, please. We took a few decisions very clearly. In a corporate situation where profits come first, we made it very clear, people first. And you can see a few pictures. Our sports club within a month became a 100-bed COVID hospital, come care center. Our canteens look the way they look even today. Buses were doubled and people were not asked to come unless there was a need. In fact, in the Bangalore plant outside Bangalore in Biddi, when we had a crisis on COVID many times and few hundred of our Boschlers having it, we decided for 1 month to actually do a partial stroke, mainly fully shut down. It affected the industry. Many CEOs asked the question, how will you meet industry demand? We did finally, but for that first month, we just ensured safety first, care and concern. Next slide. We also did something amazing, which we were used to, Bosch being an ethical-based company and a trust-based company. And CSR for us was not something about 2%. We started using our volunteers. We have 32,000 Boschlers in India. And Boschlers put up an amazing show on collaborating internally and externally. And I'm not going to read out what is here, but some of the things which I'm personally proud of, where Boschlers have taken care of reskilling 10,000 migrant workers, of ensuring ventilators were up and running, of ensuring huge amount of public health centers were doing better. And one area, next slide, which I'm personally very, very proud about Boschlers, in 8 weeks, we did a Make in India mask line, one of the 5 Bosch lines, which produces 1 lakh masks. And we pledged that 3/4 of the masks produced would go to COVID government warriors free of cost. Till date, I'm happy to say, around 50 lakh masks and counting have gone out to COVID warriors in 8 states and 4 metro cities. And this is done in our electronics plant where we produce ECUs. And we also pledged 50 crores. And I'm happy to say most of it has gone to COVID and not in checks other than the PM Care. Next slide, please. What happened was, in our communication, we started doing dipsticks. We've never in our history of 99 years done 3 dipsticks for employees. In the 3 dipsticks, the first one, we had a 40% response rate. The second one, a 90%. The third one, a 96% whopping response rate. The interesting part was 2019 was a normal Bosch year or a normal industry year. In 2020, we improved our trust index by 10 percentage points. And by the way, we also have been certified as a great place to work. The point is not about the certification. The point is about the journey and the trust. We have a whopping score of 82 on 100 that we are proud to work for Bosch and proud to be a Boschler. We had amazing communication, bottom up, top down, listening, doing course corrections where there was only one priority: people first, care, concern, profits next. Next slide, please. The picture that you see is a testimony to people first. We started in 2019, just started the Bosch Learning Campus, but in 2020, where cash was hard, where profits, in fact, we felt the first year we'll have a loss in our history, we continued building the Bosch Learning Campus. It's a center of excellence, innovation, and learning. It has 12 seminar rooms, 65 residential rooms. It has an amphitheater. It has ample place to work, study, pause, imagine, think. Art and culture will be a part. And most importantly, this is a place where Boschlers can go back to school and can rethink and reimagine based on the transformed world around us. So we went on, and the good news is a few months ago, we inaugurated it, and we are going to love the center for all the 32,000 Boschlers in 15 legal entities spread across India, and later also for select partner companies. Next slide. Bosch is a value and ethic-based company. One of the things we found in the COVID year was if we do not talk, and if we do not, more importantly, listen, and if we do not share our vulnerabilities, and I had to share my own vulnerabilities, my failures, and if we are not authentic, transparent, and honest, we will not know the way forward. There were many times, and even today, that I have to admit I don't know. We don't know many things, and CEOs, I think, know the least amongst people. What you see is a real photo of the Bosch Smart Campus. We're spending 800 crores on this. This is again people first. It's going to be a university-like, one of the smartest campuses in India, will be opened in June. We did not stop it. 6,000 trees, huge learning spaces, and 75 acres in the heart of the city of Bangalore. Our people-first journey will continue. Do we have all the answers? I'm sure no. But are we on a journey? Answer is yes. And this leads to happiness. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Soumitra, for sharing those inspiring stories. And we all have a lot of, I would say, India masala spice to learn from. Supriya, I'd like to invite you next to share how happiness and employee well-being really came to life in your organization. Supriya?
Thank you. Thanks, Adesh. A big round of applause for Soumitra. I was totally clued in and enjoyed listening to every bit that Soumitra is doing, the team is doing, and how Bosch is doing it. So I think that's a fascinating example. Talking about Western Digital, I lead Western Digital for India, which is a 3,000 people R&D site and growing. It's a worldwide HQ based in US organization. We are into storage solutions. What is important is during the COVID, what happened was there's a lot of, all of us saw a pause. There are businesses that got threatened, challenged. There are businesses that also thrived. And we've all seen those situations where a lot of digital infra businesses were seeing a spike and accelerated growth, much like others were dwindling, like the airport, the hotels. And we were looking at to say how that scenario is going to look very different. So I think in all of this, I'll be happy to share a few purposeful, very, very clearly led initiatives that we took. And as Soumitra said, we were vulnerable, we were humble, and we knew that it was okay to say that we don't have all the answers. So if I take a pause and take a step back, what did COVID do to us? For almost 12 months, we were in a situation when the problem was looming large. We knew there is this thing which is very serious. Otherwise, lockdowns in India will not happen. Lockdowns across the world will not happen. Our daily essentials as bread, eggs, jam, butter was something that we had to wait and prepare and plan for. That was not a situation we had ever seen, in case we are, of course, representing economically well affordable sections of the society. I think that is where we were. Everything came to a pause and we were wondering, now what is it that we are going to do? Digital infrastructure was something that came to our boon. So I would once again say, we have always said this, Adesh, from time to time, that IT is our backbone. They are great. Human resources are our champions. They look after the teams, legal, compliance, ethics. They keep us honest. Honestly, this was the time when I saw that authenticity in that meaning, in those statements. I think that came very clearly through, shining through. This was the backbone. Overnight, we transitioned and everything was digitally powered on. We were categorized as essential infrastructure. All of this while we moved, the cloud of uncertainty was not reducing in size. Our employees were facing across the world a situation to say, is my mortality near me? Am I going to lose some colleagues? Am I going to lose some family members? And none of us represent cases which are medically perhaps terminally ill. We are all healthy people who were facing mortality. Now that, if we pause for a second, is a very scary situation. We are today discussing vaccinations and the kind of vaccinations, and I'm glad and very hopeful that the ray of optimism and hope has come, but we've all been in those dark, deep corners where we didn't have answers. We were looking at industry forums, our employees were looking at us, and people like us who are heading countries were vulnerable, were put on the spot. And here is what we did. What we did was we said, organization structures are stable. They help us get through situations. Well, this is a time when you need an overarching structure. You need a crisis management team, which is empowered, which can day-to-day look at the policies, the government initiatives, the concerns of the safety, and perhaps, take decisions which are real time. So I constituted CMT, and that met daily. Daily an hour was dedicated because the situation was volatile. We had lots of new information. We had to decode, learn, unlearn, be agile, and quickly decide. The other part is, which is today's mantra, is go slow to go fast. We were on a pause. We were all reflecting to say, what do we do? However, the communication had to be decisive. From a classic technology, deep tech R&D organization, which has many projects that we are looking at, products we are looking at, we were discussing with HQ, we were discussing internally and saying, our employees need direction. They cannot do multiple things because they are all now powered in from dispersed locations. So I think the simple tool of prioritization, what are the top 1, 2, 3 things that you need to do, was really the most widely used tool that came handy. And therefore we sat down and we prioritized, these are the 3 things we want you to do. Clearly the message was employees first, you first. We've always said that human resources is centric, we value them. I think this was the time when the rubber hit the road and we were truly living the value. If I am alive, I can, of course, contribute to my organization tomorrow. If I'm healthy, I can contribute. So I think survival, safety were our prime concerns. And what is very important is you've got to model these behaviors day in, day out. So the leadership team, which comprises of India of 32 different engineering disciplines, sales, marketing, HR, other functions, we all met once or twice a week and we said, each one of us need to talk the same language. Employees are very smart and they ought to be. I love the next generations are much smarter and they ought to be. They cannot see through the cracks. So I think we came back to basics. Well, this is what we mean. You first. If your job can be done from home, we don't want you in office. We were very clear in our communication. There was no ambiguity because the world in itself, I think, was a lot more ambiguous than we would have liked it to be. So I think that worked very well. I'll now touch upon 1 or 2 areas as to what really is happiness. How does it connect? We all talk about trust. Trust is key. So I think organizations, when it's not raining, when they invest tons of time, significant time, effort is invested in making sure the fabric of the company is the healthy, it's the healthy part of, it's the how we are going to do work. It is about values. It's also about integrity. It's walk the talk. Western Digital has been proudly named one of the most ethical companies by Ethisphere. We take that pride seriously. We also know we have a lot to learn. We work with our employees, listening to them. So I think our trust over a period of time was a very, very strong pillar that actually got tested. And we shone very bright to say, wow, I think our employees trust us. When I'm looking and talking to them, when the other leaders are coming up and talking, our employees believe us. They know if their job can be done from home, they are not required at office. And I can say this right now, sitting at this forum, it sounds simple. It wasn't simple. There were so many queries that came. Are you sure? Do I not need to? And I think then being accessible to them and making sure that you answer, both in audio, use video as a technology, and of course you have FAQs and others, multiple modes of communication use. So I think that worked very well. It's sometimes you realize, you read about that there are times when you get COVID infected and you want to make sure your privacy. So our HR team really rose to the occasion and gave us very clear guidelines of course, how to keep safe, health, hygiene, but more importantly, how are we going to make sure your confidentiality is protected? I think those also came very strongly to our rescue. The other is, I'll touch upon, we've covered trust. The other was purpose. Purpose is something that when we had the lockdown and a lot of our jobs that cannot be done from home, 95% of could, but 5% could not, which are hardware lab dependent. We had to clearly link the why. Why is it that you need to be in office to power on that machine and do a test because you're creating a product that is required by the world right now? So I think linking the testing job to a big why of why is it required became mission critical. And I think we simplified the messages. And the final I would touch upon to say, all of us have happiness, which is defined differently. My state of mind could be different from someone else. So how is it that when you're communicating, you look at different groups and you listen to them? Because while all of us could be in this dark cloud of uncertainty that was there, our needs, our requirements were very different. Our experiences were different. Being a woman in technology, I saw, and we have seen enough and more research, data across the world, that women had a lot more on their plate that they had to deal with, juggle with. And we're still finding answers. We don't have the answer yet. But however, reaching out to them, discussing with them, and saying in a world of diffuse boundaries, how do you create those boundaries where you have your work time, you have your childcare time, you have your elder care, and you want to cook? I know, Adesh, I cooked a lot more than I would have cooked before. One was I liked doing it. I think my culinary skills improved a lot. But also it was that, sometimes your health needed a break and you rightfully treated them a lot more as people during this time than before because they weren't used to cooking 3 meals because office you go, lunch is with you. They were only meeting you at dinner. So I think all of us came together. We had new employees that had not fully integrated. How do you make sure that you reach out to them? Because they haven't yet understood, institutionalized the values. They're all carrying their experiences from multiple previous organizations. So I think that was a great find. And my heart goes out to new campus graduates who are leaving the universities, coming to us, thinking they're going to sit down with you, crack those big projects. And they didn't know how their world had changed overnight. And there were simple requests. Are you sure? How's your house look? I'm like, I have a pool table. Can we get a look at that? You were far more human. And I'm so happy that we, did away with the hierarchy, the levels, and we interacted human to human. And there are 2 things that we did in the end. Hope, there is going to be a vaccine. And I'm so glad we are talking today when there's a vaccine around the corner, we're getting vaccinated. I think hope is what, there's a cloud of darkness, you light one candle and you tend to move towards that direction. We did. And a lot of gratitude because what we had, others didn't have, and therefore a lot of give back to community service, working with Akshay Patra on boxes, giving laptops and others to communities that needed infrastructure to be able to, teach education because of the underprivileged that they don't have access. So I think a lot of those things were more for us signs of coming back to normal. And I'll conclude my quick remark with saying, when everything is uncertain and we are looking at saying what is going wrong, it was personally my job as the leader to sit down with them, talk to them and say, well, look what hasn't changed. Same parents, same family, same siblings, same company. So I think it's that kind of centrality towards what was constant also helped us steer through this crisis. And we clearly see there's an opportunity to be more flexible, more empathetic, and definitely care for employee happiness a lot more than we perhaps have done it in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Supriya. Let's give her a big hand. And thank you for sharing how accentuating the human angle can really create magic, and also for sharing your personal vulnerabilities. It's truly admirable. It's not so easy to do that in a public forum like this. Thank you. Arjun, I'd like to invite you next And let's give a big welcome to Arjun Singh.
Thank you, Adesh. I must say that I get mortified when I hear all these stories about people who juggle an extremely productive career, who are cooking 3 times a day, who have become musicians, running marathons. And I'm looking back on this last 1 year and saying, Arjun, how have you taken yourself forward? But hats off to all of you personally for the personal changes that you've made in your lives. And hats off to Soumitra and Supriya for those wonderful stories about how you have led your companies and your employees through unprecedented difficult times and done it so successfully as evidenced by the stories you shared. I would like to build on your stories by talking about my ice bucket challenge. You know what that's like when someone suddenly pours a bucket of ice cold water on you and challenges you to do something? I had that moment a little while ago when someone asked me, what do you do to bring love into the workplace? Which is such a complex and difficult question. So I would add to that perhaps, what do you do? What do I do to bring joy into the workplace? And I think of myself as a fairly good leader. I create an open, engaging organization. I do a few of the things that Soumitra and Supriya talked about. But what do I do to bring happiness into the workplace? And for today's panel discussion, we're trying to understand that have we got learnings from the last 1 year, from the pandemic, that could serve as a blueprint for the future for our workplaces? That's the unique piece about this panel that we are focusing on today. As an example, let us look at the devastation that was caused last year. But during that, our point is not to focus on the devastation, but to focus on, did we see a blueprint for Mother Nature, for our planet? We all notice how Mother Nature regenerated herself, how we saw whales and dolphins, animals, birds in places that we'd never seen, how it seemed like our planet was suddenly greener and a better place, how perhaps we could create a sustainable future if only we could slow down the relentless consumption that is really destroying our planet. And we were constrained, we were at least privileged to have what we needed, but perhaps not always what we wanted. And maybe that's a glimpse of a blueprint for the future. If we could just be happy with what we have versus if we could want what we have versus keep trying to have more and more and have what we want, maybe that gives a chance for our planet to regenerate and for us to find a sustainable blueprint for the future. And maybe we can just flick to the next slide, which is really about, as you can see, he doesn't have a selfie stick or a mobile phone, so his slipper is the selfie experience for the group. And they are also happy. They found happiness. And the next slide was that wonderful slide about the gorilla holding out a helping hand to the photographer stuck in the mud. So really, do we have a blueprint for Mother Nature where we can work hand in hand to create a sustainable world if we could just control our consumption? So similarly, really in our panel, what we want to explore is, do we have a blueprint to bring happiness into the workplace? So as I was thinking about today, I thought about, what have I done on this front over the last few years? I joined Investline only 9 years ago. And one of the first things I noticed was that we were quite a siloed organization. We're a Californian technology company. We have about 1,500 colleagues in India, But we were siloed. For such a small company, we were siloed. So I really, on day one, I started an appreciation day where we send notes of appreciation in a standard format to each other. And we attached a blue balloon to people's desks. I didn't know how it would work out. And I just come into the job, I needed to be successful. But to my delight, we ran out of balloons. By the end of the day, the floor was a sea of blue balloons. And we could see who were the people being appreciated. And we also saw who were the people who were appreciating others. And it started changing the culture and brought happiness and pride into our workplace as we recognize each other for the way we help each other, for the great things that we do. So maybe let's flick to the next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah. On the right, we can see the floor is awash with the blue balloons. And the children from this orphanage that we support are dancing on the table, celebrating their appreciation day with us. But on a reflective note, should I do this? Should I take on the responsibility of bringing happiness into the workplace? Will it let down my shareholders? Will I be seen as weak as a sucker? Will my boss not like it? The office is about productivity and performance management, not about happiness. So that's the first set of questions that I was grappling with. And the second question, which is also very fundamental, is how could I do it even if I thought that we should? We've heard with Shaumitra's and Supriya's wonderful stories how we dealt with many of the hierarchical needs, the needs represented in Maslow's model, which dealt with safety, with security, with income, with food, with air, with shelter. But that model is not on its own enough to talk about happiness, which is maybe higher up Maslow's chain with terms of respect and self-actualization. I looked at the seminal Gallup model, not the recent model on happiness, but the old model about where they ran a study over 8 years on successful workplaces, and they asked 12 questions. And those 12 questions focused on, do I know what I'm expected to do? Am I equipped to do that? Do I get feedback and encouragement and appreciation? Am I challenged and stretched? Do I have a best friend at work? Do I believe in, as Supriya said, the purpose and mission of my company? Do my colleagues do quality work? So that was a great model which talked about the key drivers of us as employees in the workplace. And I think many of those are fundamental for us to create fulfilling careers. Is someone driving my growth and fulfillment? But is that enough? What more should I be doing to drive happiness on top of these models? So another thing that we did was, we did right at the beginning, next slide please, a career fest, where each team had to compete and put up stalls to talk about what they do in some creative way. This slide I picked is actually from the HR team, where they said, we are makers of pizzas, where we get all kinds of ingredients in a company, but we turn out incredible pizzas of success, very tasty, beloved by everyone. And that's our role, to take disparate ingredients and disparate employees and create successful pizzas. And the stated purpose of this day was that we could provide eternal career paths to people as each group showcased what they do. But the hidden purpose was, it brought pride back into our company, and it brought respect back into our company. As we started saying, hey, I am so proud of what my team and I do. And we also said, hey, I respect what this other team does. I didn't realize, I thought it was only us who was doing great work. I now respect what each team does. So I thought these were great starts to building pride, satisfaction, happiness. And then, of course, we had a 100 engagement programs. But with that, let me flip to, so what happened when the pandemic hit us? What were the real lessons? And did that provide a blueprint for the future? Next slide, please. So, of course, in the early days, we flew all employees back. We focused on safety, health, and infrastructure. And even way before the lockdown, we went 100% work from home so that we kept people safe and we made them productive. And then what we noticed was, as our colleagues in California and around the world empowered us more and more, that leadership blossomed everywhere. And people all around the company took leadership because there was no blueprint. We'd never dealt with something like this before. So how were we going to be engaged, successful, productive, and happy? And obviously, like Soumitra and Supriya said, communication and engagement greatly increased. The fun element greatly increased because we all had events all the time digitally. And we got about 7 times the amount of participation because everybody could participate, including families. But what were the blueprint lessons? I would say the lessons were we naturally became non-hierarchical, as my colleagues on the panel pointed out. And that was a very powerful weapon to unleash engagement and happiness. Just next slide, please. We gave empowerment and we allowed people to be creative. We encouraged and needed people and leaders to be creative. And by leaders, I don't just mean the few of us who sit in our air-conditioned cabins. I mean leaders around the company who took on the mantle themselves of leadership. Very importantly, we learned to embrace each other as human beings in a much more holistic fashion than we had in the past. So firstly, we encounter every day our colleagues' families, children, bombing the Zoom call, and we got to know each other. Children and families participating in the engagement events. And we also, children grumbling about how these Zoom calls interfered with their chances to study. And it was a very difficult time for many people, all in cramped spaces with so many demands. But we also saw each other more holistically in the sense that people's interests and passions. Somebody is a guitarist, somebody's become a great chef, somebody else has started running and become much fitter. So our engagement with each other increased manifold. And as Supriya used this lovely phrase, human to human, not boss to subordinate, colleague to colleague. It's become human to human. And that is an incredible blueprint for us going forward. And we must never lose that. It also brought out for us gratitude. For the first time, we really felt grateful for being in jobs that survived, for getting steady salaries and bonuses, for being given a chance to contribute and take money home to our families and people who are dependent upon us. We also saw the tremendous upsurge in generosity. Our colleagues all came forward and gave to migrant causes, many other causes. Our colleagues in the US gave us extra grants, and we managed to put crores back into the broader community, into our vendors, and so many, many people who have really struggled. And we understood that we were privileged, and despite the uncertainty and not knowing what the future would be, it was an amazing moment to watch how our colleagues gave of their hearts. And I think that is also going to be part of our blueprint for the future. And as we went through this, what did we see? Just go back one slide, please. We saw that our results have never been better. Our board and our CEO have recognized the productivity in the output of our team in India and globally who have risen to the challenge. And our Glassdoor ratings for employee engagement, employee satisfaction have never been higher. So really we said, maybe we have found a blueprint which will create a different workplace to what we had before. And that can be at least one good outcome from this pandemic. So I will take a pledge that I will do the following to bring happiness into the workplace, to bring joy. We will create a culture of gratitude, of generosity, of contribution, because that is the core of any company. But we will help each other win-win and be the best that we can be in contributing to what our company needs us to be. We will have a strong culture of appreciation, and we will keep building our values, our non-hierarchical, sharing credit, boundaryless, diverse, inclusive values. They have shown their power during this difficult time. We all saw it. And they will remain center stage as we go forward. So maybe we can have a blueprint. And maybe I have found an answer as to what I can do personally to bring happiness into the workplace. Thank you.
Thank you, Arjun, for sharing a lot of these details on driving into the engine of happiness and how do you plan to leverage it in the future. Thank you. That was great. Bhumika, may I invite you next? Let's give her a big hand. You know, the business of Airbnb was very heavily impacted because of the business they are in, and it'd be lovely to know what Bhumika has to share under such challenging environment and situation. Bhumika?
Thanks, Adesh. First of all, thank you so much for curating this panel and starting this crucial conversation on happiness. This is the most needed, I think, more than ever. And Supriya, Arjun, and Soumitra, thank you so much for sharing inspiring stories. I personally got so many ideas from all of you, and I'm looking forward to implementing some of them at my own workplace. Certainly, for Airbnb, this was the toughest year, 2020, as travel got impacted the most. But I would say the story for Airbnb has been nothing but perseverance. That's the word I would say. We read article when the lockdown happened across the world. There were sort of predictions that in next 3 months or next 6 months, Airbnb will no more in the world. That word will just disappear. And multiple sort of conversations that how companies are going to get vanished, and a lot of prediction around travel companies not coming back. And we saw some of these things across board. While we were reading that, this is one company that I can say, as our topic says, crisis and opportunity. The genesis of the organization happened because of crisis. So there's a little bit of story that our founders actually rented their space in a crisis. They had a crisis of sort of wanting to fund for their education and their survival. And there was this whole design conference, and this was just one idea. They rented their space because one of the member who traveled from India to SF could not find a place to stay for the design conference, and they rented their space. And that crisis created this $100 billion organization today. So this year was sort of a revalidation for Airbnb in so many terms that, when a crisis hits, what you go back to, what are your roots, and look at that and sort of rebuild your organization. During that year, I think last year, businesses was up against incredible odds. And it was also the most defining period for us. We went back to our roots, which I say our mission statement and values. So Airbnb's mission statement is to create a place where anybody can belong. And when we say belong anywhere, for everybody, you feel belong when you're actually happy, when you find a joy in some place, and we exist for this mission. So in true sense, our whole endeavor to create happiness and sense of belonging extended beyond our employees to all stakeholders, to our guests, to our host, to our community at large, where we exist to create a place where everybody can belong. Our business actually last year dropped by 80% in just about 8 weeks. That was incredibly difficult. We had to rebuild everything. We also had a sort of once in a century crisis for the organization. But what we did is going to be more important, which is not only we rebuild our business back in 2020, but in 2020, in the midst of pandemic, we went for an IPO. And that actually is a true story of, I would say, compassion, resilience, and empathy. And these are 3 tenets on which we work with all our stakeholders. And that truly sort of sets us to be a pioneer in this sense. We focused on what was focused on the power of our core values. As I said, our mission. And creativity at the center of everything. We cared for each other, we cared for our stakeholders, our guest community, our host community. We went outside of our ways to sort of build connections. And if you see Airbnb exist, there are 2 words that can define Airbnb: creating experiences and creating connections. And if you start replicating that within the workplace, joy and happiness follows. As long as, you know, there are moments where we are creating experiences for our people and, you know, sort of connections. And we went back, you know, it's rightly, everybody rightly says that, you know, at the time of crisis, your culture actually gets tested. And it is for the world to see you, to see your values and to see your mission statement in a crisis situation. And that's what actually helped Airbnb to rebuild. What we did, so for our employees, we had a difficult situation to sort of let go of a certain segment of our employees. But that's what, that's where empathy did drive our decisions. The way the whole management was done in terms of sending off our employees, where we decided to sort of focus on simple things. We decided to simplify our objectives, to have one mission organization-wide. We had to unfortunately let go of our employees, but that's in that testing time, empathy and connection really helped. We went out of our way, so sort of created employee database. We reached out to organizations, we sent referral letters. We could almost place 90% of our employees. We created employee fund. We funded our employees, our ex-employees, till the time they got an opportunity somewhere else. And that's what, you know, while your business is probably bleeding and you're trying to get back on your feet, but not losing your core value of, you know, being a great host and championing your mission, actually helped creating those experiences. Today, when we are actually, you know, in about 9 months, we got our business back, almost 90%, revenue up. Our 75% employees have joined us back. And that's a sort of, I would say, a testament of the values and culture that we have at Airbnb. So for our employees, that empathy worked, the connection worked. For our host community, we did a lot of one-on-one sessions with our host community, tried understanding their challenges, their situations. You can imagine we have 7 million listing on our platform, and 7 million, almost 90% of people's you know, revenue or their livelihood is based on Airbnb. And that was a big concern for us when there was a lockdown and people could not travel. It still is the situation for most part of it. We did reach out to our host and guest community, as you know, they were dependent on us, and we almost from our investor money, we sort of donated all of that money to our host community. our employees came forward. We have a very unique concept of employee travel credits, and all our employees donated all their credits to our host community. And that supported our host community. Again, connection, empathy, and sort of long-term relationship. And that has, I would say, made Airbnb what it is known for. We also had our hosts actually opened their homes for frontline workers throughout the pandemic 2020. We sort of supported all our hosts, our frontline communities. For community at large, we've seen a lot of racism situation as well across world. Last year in 2020, a lot of our community members were struggling and are still struggling with discrimination and a lot of racism situation. Talking about ethics and how our platform supports anti-discrimination through our business is that we removed those hosts who were part of the hate group. And we did a massive exercise to sort of ensuring that all the hosts who are on our community are sort of, they believe in our mission statement in terms of creating a place where everybody can belong. So that also has helped us during the pandemic. And the last thing that I would say, in terms of our guest community, a lot of refunds that we did to our guest community, we handheld them. We sort of supported them during the their reservations. So that's an outreach that we made. Coming to resilience, we simplified our business. We built great connections with our employees. Our employees, along with us, co-created the culture that we are extremely proud of. This is something that we did, as I said, through a lot of belonging, diversity, innovation, and creativity. One thing that worked with respect to resilience, we started something called as Empower, which is it's a platform, it's an innovation platform. And when there were a lot of things on everybody's mind in terms of, sort of physical well-being, mental well-being, we also created an opportunity for employees to think beyond, give their ideas, whether it is people practices or business practice or about our product on this platform. And we made them CEO of their ideas. We supported them through these ideas, and the sense that they got, the kind of pride, joy, and contentment they got after implementing the ideas were phenomenal. So these are some of the things we did. And I would say at the end, Airbnb is truly committed to its mission statement, and whatever we do, whether it is business, our product, our community, and our people practices are all driven by value system and mission statement. And that led us through the pandemic, and it also kept the happiness quotient really up for us. Adesh, back to you. Adesh, I think you're on mute.
Thank you, Bhumika. Thank you for sharing, the stories of how you and your team dealt with adversity so compassionately and so effectively, and got those the seeds germinating again. Thank you for sharing that. So, dear audience, thank you for your attention, and we are getting some questions, and I'd like to urge you to send more. And while you're sending your questions, there are a few thoughts that I'd like to share with you. So, I've been a student of happiness for the last about 20 years. I've been a practitioner. I've also been a teacher. And as I've been thinking about this topic, for the last few years, there are four aspects of, from the point of view of employees that we can think about. The first one is health and safety. Very, very important. It does not lead to something great, but if not done right, it can do a lot of damage. And there are laws around that. And depending on what trade, sector, country, jurisdiction you are in, if you are simply able to comply to those laws and practices, and you create the right culture, then you'll be able to create the right health and safety related environment and deliverables in the company. And this is quite well established in majority of the industries. I think the second aspect is employee engagement. This is a relatively new topic, perhaps about 30 years old, and the science and the art behind this has been evolving. Quite well established right now, but it still remains somewhat of a mystery in addition to the scientific part to it, right? The ultimate goal is, based on the community of employees that you have, how do you create sustained meaning, value, and experience for them? And this is not a static thing. The employee population is continuously changing. Their needs are changing. Your environment is changing. The business of the company is changing. So how do you learn to row the boat in this flowing river with a lot of currents and waves? Now, when it comes to employee engagement, I'd like to bring the parable of the tech industry into it, the core and the edge. The sharper and stronger you can make the core, that will continue to produce results for a longer period of time. Engagement is not something that you do and you get the results the next day. You can create a transaction that will create a moment of output, but it will not be long lasting. So the long lasting employee engagement comes from a strong core, strong foundation. And then you have to keep sharpening your edge. Once you get the foundation to be strong, the core to be strong, how do you, the results and the output and the outcomes are then dependent on sharpening the edge, right? All the speakers have talked about it. At Tata Communications, we have 12,000 employees in 40 plus countries. And for the last few years, we have been lucky to be rated as best employer, great place to work for women in multiple countries for multiple years. So we have a great set of leaders and managers and employees who are making this happen. The third aspect is well-being. And well-being is not something that I had personally thought about before the pandemic. The pandemic really sharpened it. And well-being has multiple aspects, right? It could be mental health, it could be physical health, it could be work-life balance, etc., etc. And as we saw, by touching base with large number of employees through formal surveys as well as informal meetings, for example, I meet with at least 1,000 employees a year. You get a sense of where the new need is. So we ran a large number of well-being programs related to mental health, physical health, sleep, nutrition, etc., right? And that, I think, is going to continue. It's a new need that has come up. And the last aspect of this, which is really the core of this panel discussion, is happiness. Now, happiness, I think, and I believe, actually I'm quite confident, is a skill that can be learned. It is not something that you can give to somebody. It's something that you have to learn, that you want to be happy. And the role that the company can play is threefold. The first is, just like any other topic related to technical competence, functional competence, behavioral competence, you create learning and capability programs. Can you introduce the topic, the science of happiness, to the employees? Create this spark in them so that they are no longer dependent on somebody for their happiness. Is that something that can be done? And we actually introduced that in our company in a big way in the last 1 year. We have been doing it for a long time, but it was like a sustained program for all employees in all countries. And the results are quite powerful. We conducted Art of Living Sky, the Sudarshan Kriya happiness program for all our employees. And we measure everything in our company through the Net Promoter Score. And I was very pleased, and I'm sure you will be pleased, maybe shocked to know that the Net Promoter Score for the Art of Living Happiness program was 93. It was just simply amazing. Yeah. I think the second thing is, once you have created the spark in somebody or an insight, the habits need to change. The habit needs to form. So how do you create a community within the company, multiple communities, so that people can undertake this journey together? Very, very hard to change a habit just by oneself. But how do you create the ecosystem, a supportive system to pursue this journey and really make a lasting change? The third thing is, it is a well-known fact, looking at the Indian scriptures and the ancient knowledge and the personal experience that each one of us has had, that when you serve others without any interest, it creates happiness. So how do you get employees to do selfless acts as a matter of habit on a daily basis? By helping each other, being a part of various communities within the company, solving problems for others, and then doing big time volunteering, right? Go out and do that. For example, at Tata Communications, we run a drive week. So during that week, every employee anywhere in the world gets one paid day off to do a full day of volunteering. And we organize 200 projects all over the place so that people can participate in something that they would like to participate that day. And then throughout the year, we run volunteering programs around the world. And that we have seen is, rather than just being cared for, when you learn to care for others, the pursuit of happiness starts to become real. And those are some of the things that we have been working on and I have been thinking about. And I'd love to get comments, questions, and challenges from all the panelists and all the people in the audience. But now it's time for questions. And before we take up the questions from the audience, I have one question each for each of the panelists. And Soumitra, I'd like to start with you. Even if all the companies in India take up the mission to make their employees happy, it would still be like a drop in the ocean, right? If the organized sector is a relatively small sector. What are the breakthrough ideas that you would like to share or you would like to think about which can impact the happiness quotient in India? Soumitra?
Yeah, thank you, Adish. By the way, the audience should know Adish is very, smart. He doesn't tell you what's the question he's going to ask. So thanks, Adish. I would say, Adish, the best thing in my view is to keep it simple and authentic. And, I liked your phrase because it's something that I've always believed in, an agenda without an agenda. And then it has to be really an agenda without an agenda. Corporate life, you can play many games, and the games are amazing. So the agenda without an agenda, which many times baffles people, and that can bring about. So for me, I would sum it to say, one cannot extract work life from personal life. And what we do in our personal lives, both to seek, retain, and again, fall back perhaps in the trap of unhappiness, are lessons learned around what we have in the corporate world. So I would say authenticity, simplicity, agenda without agenda, and a very strong interlinkage of practicing what we do for our near and dear ones, where we have no agendas, also in the workplace.
Okay, thank you very much, Soumitra. So you're talking about a cultural change, which is authentic, which is inclusive, which is integrating different aspects of life rather than trying to live each one of them individually. Thank you for sharing that. Arjun, I'd like to come to you next. Do you think an organization should take responsibility for the happiness of their employees? What are the pros and cons?
That is a very profound question, Adesh. I think that organizations are set up to provide returns to shareholders of some nature or the other. And you can broaden who you want to serve and who your stakeholders are. But you can't pursue a mission that is misaligned with the main objective of giving returns to shareholders. And I think that many of us as leaders have unconscious biases that pursuing happiness in the workplace is contradictory to our main agenda. There is no data that shows that. So clearly it is part of a bias and maybe sometimes superficial conversations around, no, if you're driving happiness, you won't performance manage people. That's a myth. You'll still performance management because you have to find a win-win where employees will only be happy if they are productive. No employee wants to be in a company just being carried by the company where they are the worst performer, they don't know how to do the job, they're not set up to succeed. Why would we think we're doing them a favor to carry them? So the real question is, how do we persuade ourselves that there is a win-win to be found, which is we will meet our shareholders' objectives, in fact, perhaps even in a better way than we have before, if we create a company of happy employees. And in that regard, I think, yes, then we should take responsibility. I believe I should take responsibility for driving the agenda of happiness in the company.
Thank you, Arjun, for sharing that. Supriya, in the recently published World Happiness Report 2021, India was ranked 139 out of 149 countries. Do you really agree with this? And if you were to look at only the segment of employees that work for so many companies in India, do you think the ranking would be different? And how could there be a common mechanism to measure happiness in companies?
If the question to Arjun was compounding one, I wonder what I would call my question. But thanks, Adesh, for asking that. And I believe UN World Happiness Report stakeholders, I hope they're tuned in because you just got yourself a board member here. So please listen very carefully and intently of what I'm going to say. Love the question. I was reviewing that, Adesh, and that happens when you raise your hand and you say yes to an opportunity like this, to come here and be a part of this forum. You do your research. 139 out of the 149, 150 countries is a very dismal score. Does it make me happy? No, it in fact contributes to my unhappiness score. But let's look down like any problem solver, like an engineer. We say, let's break down the problems. If you look at the factors that look at it, it's actually very sharp 6 variables they're looking at. They're looking at income, healthy life expectancy, social support, and you spoke beautifully about how we need to come forward and do a lot more on social support. There is freedom. And Arjun spoke about, we're all biased. We all carry biases. I as a woman or I as a human sometimes don't experience the liberal lifestyle, the choices I make. I feel like we are always compounding them by justifying those. So I think there's work to be done on freedom for sure. If you look at trust, I think that is one singular variable. If we single out, my sense as corporate is really a shining example of how we've all come together and done a lot better than perhaps we did in the past. They say families that eat together stay together. I think as corporate, we have stuck together. We are very nimble, flexible, agile to new models. And there is research, Arjun, that also says that, if people have trust in your companies, you're going to be 74%, you'll experience less stress and 106% more energy at work. Well, that productivity is right there for us to see. So I think when we look at all of this and coupled with the fact that you started your journey, Adesh, 20 years back. Some of us are just kind of, still knocking on the door, and the door hasn't opened yet on generosity. We do things which are interspersed once in a while. We do that. We do care about the communities we work in. You don't plant a tree today, you cannot expect to live under the shade and bear and eat the fruits tomorrow. So I think all of us are waking up to the fact. So I would say, I don't have a choice but not to agree with 139 out of 149, but I would say this with a pinch of salt and probably a bucket of salt, that maybe these variables need to be a lot more inclusive, looking at where the countries are, where their population is. We are struggling with basic food, shelter, safety. I think happiness is still a far cry. But for some of us who are in corporate, have resources to our disposal, I think we need to start making our efforts ASAP. So I can say this, it's a decade-old concept, but I commit to this on this forum, which is recorded, which is publicized world over. Arjun is already committed. Soumitra is in. You are our guru and mentor. We look forward to you. I commit to going back and saying happiness is something I'm going to discuss with my India team and HR team and say, can we learn from Adesh what is happening at Tata's? Can we set up calls and then go back and dip that in the ink of our own system, our own values, and see how the journey can start a lot more intentional than perhaps we've done it in the past, would be my, pride moment, or say that my humble, ask of myself and others. Let's do this. Let's do this and start making a difference. I would like to be in the top 10, Adesh. I'm competitive by nature. I would see us in top 10.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. And making commitments like this in a public forum is really amazing. A lot of courage and conviction required for that. So thank you everyone for doing that. So Bhumika, you're like everything is tech company today, right? And Airbnb is driven by tech. So let me give you a curveball, like a bouncer. How do you think technology could be leveraged for increasing the effectiveness of happiness-related programs in a company?
Thanks, Adesh. Thanks for that curveball. Definitely, technology is right in, at the center and front of what we are doing today, especially in a virtual world. There's no way that we cannot we cannot be dependent on technology for anything, including happiness. And whether we call it happiness or wellness, because wellness is such a critical part of being someone happy, at least as far as you talk about physical, mental, and social well-being. I would also include financial well-being. So as long as that's there, it definitely aids to happiness. And it's such a rapidly evolving and topic, and becoming an integral part of how employers are ensuring even productivity at the end of the day, right? So of course, technology is going to play a big role if we already have not moved in that direction. And some of the ways that we can do, sort of take help of technology is specifically in a virtual world. And we all know that we're not going to go back to usual ways of working. World has changed in so many ways. The first one really on top of my mind is, how do we encourage collaborative working? That is very, very important. There are so many tools that's available today. And, Supriya also talked about 5% of that population asking right questions. Why is it needed for them to be in office? Are there ways that we can make 100% population work from office? Today at Airbnb, nobody goes to office from last 1 year, while it has its own, other emotional nuances. But people do want to go to, at the end of the day, we are social beings, so we would love to meet with each other. But as safety and security really is paramount, we want to make sure that everyone is safe. We have been operational 100% capacity in a virtual world. So I would rate that as top. The second one, there are a lot of ways. Engagement, we all have spoken a lot about it. Engagement, connection, and experiences. A lot of it will be done through technology, can be done through technology. There are a lot of gamification these days. Everything can be gamified to enhance the connection with employees, especially in a virtual world, whether it is some engagement goals, even talking about prioritization, measuring productivity, enhancing goals, setting milestones, incentivizing our people, even also about, doing our engagement surveys. And gone are the days, Adesh, where, we used to be dependent on once in a year traditional engagement surveys. It's just the experience of employees on any given day, and it's anytime sentiment check. That's what is going to be very, very important if we are already not doing that. And it all is supported by technology. And the last one that I would say is, in fact, two more. One is people and analytics. That drives the whole lot of business strategy, deciding the right direction for business to move in, to simplify our business priorities as well, given in a situation whether we are in pandemic or post-pandemic, how our business is doing. So a lot of people analytics, data-driven pointers are going to help us in the right direction. And social engagement would be the last, I would say, not least, especially in a virtual world. So corporates are trying to figure out ways to leverage social platforms to connect our employees to be able to share what matters most for them. And that's where I think technology is handy, where we can use social media to create, to talk about, the social life, or life which is outside of work, especially in a current scenario where professional and personal life, is, that line has completely being blurred. So sort of making it a right place, and also rewarding people, publicly announcing, creating wellness programs for them, creates a sense of belonging and connection and trust with the organization.
Thank you, Bhumika, for that very detailed explanation and various ideas through which technology could be leveraged. So we have received many questions from the audience, and I'm looking at my phone to read them. Some questions are anonymous. We don't know the name, but we have a question from Ronak Agarwal. We have another question from Arpita, and many more. We have only 2 or 3 minutes left now. So I'd like to ask the question that Atul Kumar Jain has sent, and he says, while so much time and effort has been put in employee well-being and happiness, how do we measure the impact of all that has been put in for them? And Shaumitro, may I ask you to answer that question on behalf of all of us in the panel?
Yeah, I think I tried to explain it saying that the main thing is to do both formal and informal dipsticks. Conversations and dialogues when they are honest and open, and especially if conversations and dialogues have a very high listening quotient. I mentioned to you, we've tried to bring in an 80% listening quotient. Just the power of listening is so powerful. The power of silence is so powerful. And we realize that we need sometimes both formal and informal. And the listening has helped quite a bit. And I believe, at least for us, we're going to keep it very strongly as a part of the culture. And I can tell you, Adesh, and just end with that, I think we are all grappling and scratching right now at the surface, because mental health, when I compare it with physical and mental health is right now a dark room. And there we need empathy, vulnerability, courage, and authenticity to talk about issues which have been taboos for years, the unwritten taboo, and especially in corporates.
Yeah. Great. No, thank you very much, Shaumitro. And I think we are top of the program, just 1 minute. And I'd like to thank you all, panelists, for sharing such wonderful ideas and your experiences. I think we have all become richer with that. And thank you, Niyati, and thank you, Nikhil, and the whole WFEB and Art of Living corporate programs organizing team for hosting this. And I'd like to hand it over back to Nikhil. Nikhil? So these are the the social handles which everyone can follow and keep track of what's going on in the conference. And the bonus of this session is that if you scan this QR code or follow this, click on this tiny URL, there's going to be a wonderful meditation session by Swami Jyotirmaya starting immediately after this session. So please do it. I can promise you the meditation is going to be wonderful. Swamiji is a great teacher and human being, and please do join us for that. Thank you very much, and namaste, and bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you great.
Perfect. So I will just put all of you with the panelists in the breakout room just to prepare for our next session. Is that okay?
Sure. Are we set to start on time, 10:15?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Just give me a minute.
And this, so when you take us out of the breakout, we'll be on live stream. Is that correct?
Not yet. We'll come back to the mainstream, but then we will prepare for the live. Then just go to the live stream. Great.
Okay, perfect. Good morning. Good morning, April, Johan, Madhu. So nice to see you guys.
We are live now.
Great. Well, on behalf of WFEB TLEX Institute, I just wanted to welcome everyone. And I'd like to start with just acknowledging the thoughtful remarks from the opening panel this morning, the keynote panel. It's such an amazing time of challenge and also hope. And I'm very excited to bring this breakout panel together. The great COVID reset. And how do we build back with greater resilience, connection, and empathy and equity? So just wanted to start with a few opening remarks. Then I'll introduce the panelists, and then we should get into a great discussion. Very, very excited. So first, I'd like to start by thanking all of our global partners. This has been a global collaboration, and yeah, it's such an honor and a privilege to be here with all of you today, all of the people live streaming and all of the people who are participating in the Global Symposium. And I'd like to just start by setting some context, which all of us know, but is sometimes hard to put in perspective. So I love the idea of a metaphor with this. And COVID has been, in a way, like a huge tidal wave. For many of us, we've felt the ground moving out from under us, the way we work, the way we live, the way we take care of our families, the way communities interact with each other. So as that ground is pulling out, there's also a whole accelerant of trends coming toward us. An acceleration toward digital commerce away from say, local commerce, a deep exposure to inequities in our systems, in our structures, particularly here in the United States. And while COVID hasn't been all bad, I know many people have spent more time with their families than they have in years in many cases. We can't deny that there have been massive challenges, and it's come at a massive cost. And one of those things, at least here in the United States, which is top of mind, is just access and to services, to human services, and to healthcare, and many of the deep inequities that we have in our country around that. The disproportionate burden on women and mothers who are often juggling home and work has come at a massive cost. And the unhealthy coping mechanisms that many have faced as they have been trying to cope with the social isolation of the pandemic, which was already an underlying trend around mental health and many things around addiction. And these are just some of the many challenges that we've been facing. But for this session, I bring a lot of hope and also, and I'm very excited about the panel that has come together here, because I feel like each of them has such unique insights into what a reset could look like. and also brings great lived experience to this point and tacit knowledge that they can share with all of you. And we very intentionally have created cross-disciplinary panels. So I'll share more about each of the panelists, but we have deep expertise in community work and policy. We have a technologist, business person who's building out future solutions. And we have an advisor executive who is advising many of the fast accelerating tech companies that will shape the world that we live in. So with that, I will go to the panel introductions, and I'll start with April Walker. So April Walker is a senior director at overseeing 15 Centers for Excellence Technology Labs at Microsoft. She's also a graduate of the Sloan School of Business, and she shares a passion for both business transformation, but also community and civic engagement. And April, welcome to the panel. So nice to have you. The next person I'll introduce is Johan Uveen. Johan is a founder and advisor of his principal advising services, but he's also a two-term former acting Secretary of Education under President Obama, and has been a former delegate to a number of different organizations, including the OED and numerous other things, including being a PhD from Harvard Kennedy School. And last, I'd like to introduce Muju, who has 20 years experience in 20 plus years experience in management consulting, executive roles, is a volunteer who's very committed to community resilience, and also serves as a mentor to many, and is advising leaders who are really building the future now in high, fast-growing, accelerating companies. And so with that, I think we can go into the panel view, and we'll go ahead and get started. So the first question I'd like to start with is, so often we're looking forward into the future around what are the trends that are coming, what are the shiny objects that we can pursue, or the new innovations and technologies. But I thought for starting this panel, I would start with really taking in the moment, just having a pause around what we've been through and also where we are right now. So I thought I would start with you, April, if you could share some of your remarks with us.
Yeah, it's interesting when I think about this past year, and candidly, we are still in it, right? We haven't turned the corner yet completely. I am always reminded of what I call the imperfect storm, because it really was. I can't call it a perfect storm because that implies something good. We've come through such an unnerving time where, as you spoke about earlier, Johan, the world and the earth beneath us has shifted. We had, I think, a combination of pandemics. We had the virus, obviously, but we've also had social unrest. We've had, more concentration and visibility in terms of inequities and racial, not just social, but racial unrest. Lack of accessibility to resources, inequities in pay, and healthcare. So, when I think about what that future looks like, or what I'm most hopeful about is, and you and I have spoken about this before, my sincerest hope in being hopeful is that we don't forget. We don't forget what we've come through. We have a tendency to have very short recall and memory. When things are bad, we really, pull up our sleeves and do the work. The moment it gets good again, or the world becomes better again, we tend to forget what we've gone through, and we will then repeat the past, and we don't want to do that. So I'm most hopeful that these painful lessons that we've learned, that we're going to look at the future and think and be more mindful and intentional about how we avoid them in the future. That's what I'm most hopeful for. Hopefully that was your question.
Oh, thank you so much for those remarks. Madhu, how about from your point of view as we take in this moment? What are some of the salient patterns or motifs that you're sort of seeing?
That's a great question. And just building on what April said, we've been through a very unprecedented time. I don't remember using the term unprecedented as much as I used it over the last 13 months. And these times have tested us, right, at every level, be it personal or professional. And as I look at from a very professional centric perspective, I do feel that there is a